Welcome everybody out today. This is a great event. When Mike reached out to me, he explained the plan of this meeting. I think this is a great gathering, get together to get to know each other very well. A chance to share about the Sheriff's Office and its role, which I'll explain a little later. But first, I want to welcome the chiefs from the jurisdictions that are here. I'll introduce them, and then as we break off into our groups, if the chiefs brought some lieutenants or support staff, they'll introduce them then. But
Great. We've asked Reverend Patty Sanchez to offer an invocation, a blessing on the food. For those who may not know Reverend Sanchez, she is the chair of the Ogden Interfaith Works Council. She's also the pastor over at the Episcopal Church of the Good Shepherd in downtown Ogden. And so if you are not getting invites to the monthly interfaith meeting and you would like to attend, please corner Patty after, and let's make sure that the connection happens, or email me after the fact and we'll connect you. And
We thank you, Lord, for bringing us all here together today. We thank the people that made the lunches. We thank the people that organized this. Help us to have discerning hearts and open minds, and help us meet new people. And help us to know that we serve the community, and we will always work together. Amen.
Amen. We wanted to share a couple of thoughts that we've had as we have worked with law enforcement and with each of you in your individual churches, synagogues, mosques, and what a blessing it has been for us to be able to hang out with you. So thank you so much for your examples, and thank you for taking time to be here. I have a soft spot for law enforcement, having served a career in it, and many of you in the faith community probably don't even know that, but some are shaking their head. The reason we are doing this is to connect you, the faith leader, with your law enforcement counterpart in hopes that you build a closer relationship where you can reach out in times of need, and they can reach out in times of need. And on the little map that I put up on the screen, if you are in the green, you are in Weber County, which is everybody that's here, except for the base team that's here. But if you are in a church in Pleasant View, North Ogden, Harrisville, Ogden City, South Ogden City, Riverdale, or Roy, you have a direct line to your police chief. Those that are in what the sheriff calls contract cities throughout the county all fall under the sheriff's office. Some chiefs, because faith leaders in their community didn't sign up to come today, are not here today. But we will help you make those connections if you would like to meet with them. I also want to make a reminder that the Meeting House Security Grant that's offered through FEMA and through the Utah Department of Emergency Management is now available. They are taking the applications now, and the fuse is really short on this. We sent out information for the last couple months to all of you. Some of you have taken advantage of this in the past. This is amazing to me because we have gotten more than $3 million in funding to help houses of worship, and those are other than Latter-day Saint congregations, that being my faith tradition. And some of you have been the benefactors of that. So please consider taking that. If you just take a scan of that QR code, it will take you to a Google Drive we set up with all of the documentation and the connections to get to the state. So please consider doing that. From both the faith community who have been asked by their pastor or their faith leader to serve in this position, and undoubtedly the sheriff, the chiefs may have someone that they do. So as you break out to these little breakout sessions, you'll come to know who each of those individuals are so that you can create some relationships individually. I wanted to start with some comments by one of our local pastors, Richard Brenton. He came to Ogden shortly after the Ferguson, Missouri shootings. When this young man was shot and killed, the community just erupted. And the challenge was that the faith community and law enforcement were not in line with each other and actually became adversarial. Rick was a pastor in Ferguson and lived through that experience. He is actually with someone today as a hospice visit that he couldn't make it, so we recorded this because he wanted to share a couple of thoughts that he had.
My name is Reverend Richard Brenton, or Rick Brenton, and I've been a pastor since 2010, and I've been serving here in Ogden, Utah since 2017. But before that, I served in Ferguson, Missouri, and I was there during the time when Michael Brown was shot and killed, 18-year-old. The relationship between politics and police and the clergy, it was not the best relationship. It was a bit contentious, and actually at times it was adversarial. When protests took place right in front of the police station, a number of Black pastors came from all over our country and blocked the driveway at one point on a rainy, miserable day, and were all arrested and taken inside. For the most part, it was an adversarial relationship between the Ferguson police and the clergy, and no matter how many times we reached out and tried to make peace with them, work with them, it seemed like even the political leaders were upset about clergy getting involved in any way, shape, or form. I think that the whole situation could have gone a lot more smoothly had there been a working relationship between political leaders as well as the police with clergy prior to the shooting of Michael Brown. The people in the streets, the everyday people, respected the clergy. There wasn't a lot of respect for the police because of the history that there was already there. And so building a strong bond between the police and the clergy might begin with an old religious tenet. Actually, it was a Middle Eastern thought that anytime you sit down with somebody for a meal, you are no longer enemies. You're always friends. And then from there, find ways to collaborate and find how those two groups could work together, not only working with one another, but also reaching out to the public for those that are on the margins of society, the poor and the broken.
So when we first met Reverend Brenton, he had come into Ascension Lutheran Church 9 years ago, fresh from Ferguson, and pled at that time for us to continue to work toward creating closer relationships between law enforcement and the clergy. His motivation was very clear as to why he did it. Interestingly, I retired in January, but until January, I have continued my law enforcement association, and I would meet with the major cities' chiefs of police 3 times a year somewhere in the United States. And shortly after the murders that occurred at the Emmanuel Episcopal the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, about 2 weeks after, Chief Greg Mullen of that police department came to meet with this body of police chiefs from across the world and shared with them his experience when 9 members of their congregation were murdered by a white supremacist who came in and clearly had some kind of an agenda to settle. Chief Mullen was immediately faced with an incredible amount of distrust in the community, rioting, and challenges, including organizations from the outside coming in and creating more anarchist situations than providing help as they tried to use those shootings as a platform. I talked to Chief Mullen on the phone a few nights ago and asked him if he would share some of his comments about what changed things for him, because the difference was Chief Mullen, for years before that incident had occurred, created a relationship with the clergy in his community. And the faith leaders within his community met with him regularly. He went to lunch with them. He spent time with them. They did service projects together. And he shares this comment.
I would really encourage you to take every opportunity in every moment that you have, because in most cases, it's not going to be if you encounter one of these situations, it's going to be when. And that is not the time that you want to start building those relationships. We all know that, but unfortunately, we don't take that to heart in very many cases. So the pre-work is what allows you to be successful when you face the worst day of your career. Thank you. Well, my name is Greg Mullen, and I'm the Chief of Police and Assistant Vice President for Public Safety at Clemson University. Prior to that, I was the Chief of Police in Charleston, South Carolina for about 11 years. And as many of you probably know, in 2015, we had a shooting at the Mother Emanuel AME Church that really just devastated our community, our state, and certainly had impacts across the country. And one of the things that has really evolved since that time in terms of, looking back at that event and trying to determine what were some of the really important aspects of that response was the relationships that we had provided and presented over the past 8 years prior to that situation. And we had built relationships throughout our community, but predominantly one of the really critical groups that we had worked with a lot was the clergy. And we had reached out to clergy of all types of denominations, and we had been able to really create those positive relationships through utilization of activities that we had in the community that was not really connected to law enforcement. It was about how could we lift people up in our community? How could we encourage them and empower them to move beyond that criminal aspect that so many people thought about when they thought about, what was the police's role? Safety, but it's also about, building people's abilities through the spirituality, through nutrition, through mental health, all of those things. And when we started to talk about those things with our clergy partners, they really realized that it was not about locking people up or going in and creating enforcement opportunities in those communities, but that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing everything that we possibly could to keep people out of the criminal justice system and then building communities so that they could be as enjoyable as possible. And we were working with clergy that sometimes didn't agree with us. I mean, they had different opinions about things that had occurred in the community. And we came to a realization that we don't have to agree with everything, but we all have the same common purpose, which is we wanted to make our communities safe. We wanted to make them enjoyable. We wanted to make them equitable and for all people that were living in those communities. Through those really deep relationships and connections that we were building over time, when the incident happened at Mother Emanuel, we were able to rally those clergy very quickly. And not only were they able to provide support to those people who were hurting throughout our community, and obviously just because the event happened at Mother Emanuel, that didn't stop it from rippling into other churches and other communities, because there was a lot of connections between different people and families. And so we reached out to those clergy members to help us not only share the message of what was going on, because we all know from a well-being perspective, the more accurate information that you can get out into your communities, the better that's going to be. So the clergy was a great way for us to do that. We met with them pretty quickly after the event and asked them to put out information across their congregations so that accurate information would be provided. We also pulled them in when we had outside disruptors and protesters and demonstrators that came into our community specifically that were focused on Mother Emanuel itself. And they were able to interact with those individuals so that the police or others did not have to, that would have created another controversy within our city. So the ability for us to reach out to those clergy members, some of them were also very significant community activists. And when we had these disruptors come in, not only during the actual event, but also as the trials were, they were actually with me all the way in sharing communications to these people coming from outside of our city that we don't need you here. We don't want you to come in and destroying our city. We're going to take care of this. We have a relationship, and we're going to trust that the right thing is going to be done. And I can't tell you how important that was as a police chief when all of these things were going around and going on in our city, to have that type of relationship and that type of support. As this was evolving, a group of clergy came together, and once a month for almost 12 months, they would come together and they would actually pray for the police department. They would pray for the city. From my perspective, the relationships and the work that was put into that relationship prior to that event really manifested itself in a very powerful way. And I believe allowed us to immediately start to heal in our community, because this was all about an assault on the church. It was about a white supremacist who went into a predominantly black church that was very symbolic because of its history. He wanted to start a race war, but because of the love and the grace that was demonstrated not only by the family but the other church members and Mother Emanuel, that had a rippling effect. And then when it brought in all the other clergy, it was a healing opportunity for us in our community. And as the police chief there, I can tell you that I will never forget the benefit and the powerful relationships that we had, and how they allowed us to maneuver through this very critical and very traumatic situation that occurred in our city.
As Bonnie and I met with members of our council to discuss this and get support to do this, we kept thinking about how much we love each of you, and we acknowledge what you bring to the table. And I think you acknowledge sometimes we are on completely different ends of the spectrum when it comes to lifting the people that you serve in the church, and law enforcement having to protect the public as well. And so we hope that together you'll find those ways that fit for your community to bring together the best of both worlds, because people do need accountability, but they do need a loving arm that that goes around them and lifts them up when they're down and broken too. So thank you from our perspective, and I'd like to turn the time over to the sheriff to kind of get us through the next phase of what's going to happen here. And we'll just publicly thank you here for taking time out of your schedule to come. So with that, Sheriff, we'll leave it up to you.
You guys remember 2020 quite well. It was a challenging time on many levels, with medical, with COVID, relationships, with each other's neighbors, work. There's so many facets to this. There was a lot of information out there that was hard to disseminate what is real and what is not. And there was a big concern in the community if people can gather together and meet. And being a sheriff in the anticipated role that many people perceive this to be, I receive a lot of phone calls on what I'm going to do and who am I going to arrest. And I know, and respectfully, there's a lot of interesting people that we work with, and you got to give them the benefit of doubt.
Us too.
Yes. But one afternoon, I got a phone call from Dave Malinak with the Berean Baptist Church, and I've known Dave for a long time. And he said, "Sheriff, we are going to open our church Sunday." And he said, "I want to know if you or Ogden City is going to arrest me." And allow to gather. And without hesitation, I asked Dave, Dave and I are not on the same faith, like many of us here. I'm pretty sure that we all align with a similar belief, 90% or plus, than what not. I said, "Dave, what time's church?" He said, 10 o'clock. I said, "Dave, I'll be there." I said, "We'll both go to jail if we have to." But the thing that I loved about Dave is we have a connection. We don't see the faith as a difference in each other. We didn't see an us versus them. He has a right, and this is where the sheriff does become involved. There's a lot of discussion these days about the Constitution, and people believe it's absolutely being torn apart. And what are we doing to strengthen that? I can tell you, everyone in this group, the chiefs already know this, that every single chief in this county will do everything it can to protect your right to freely assemble. And I think, and I have a love and gratitude for our chiefs. You see the dirty part mostly of what we do. But to each side of them and our staff, there's a glorious side that we got in. It's like our military. We got in to serve. We want to protect. What is missing is the communication. Sometimes we form silos or barriers. There's often discussion of which police department or agency is better than the other. And there's discussion like that amongst religions. But what it comes down to it is we're all unique and we have a different goal, we have different ideas, and we choose certain paths in our life. The bottom line is what's beautiful about the Constitution is that's our right, and that needs to be protected. Plainly. So anyway, I went to Dave's church. It was a great, sorry, I almost said event, it's not an event. It was a great service, thank you, sorry. And it was so neat to see the light in the eyes of those that attended. And it's a lot of the light that you all share. We share, and we need to share better. And I think Mike's putting these together. We're going to break up here, and then everyone that, the leaders that are within the Ogden area, stay here, and then Weber County and the rest of the chiefs and all us will move to the other side of this wall. And then we'll introduce ourselves, answer some questions back and forth. But the bottom line is that we want to go away this is we want to establish trust, more trust, a connection. Please call me if you have any questions both ways, because we need each other. The best law enforcement that anyone can have is a relationship with the community and its members. That's how you have a successful team, a successful community.